In the Sahara in 1942, Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, pushed the Italian-German forces to within a step of the Suez Canal. Through lightning assaults and fragile supply lines, the Axis looked poised for triumph, until Allied naval power, anchored on the beleaguered Malta, upended every forecast. From the swift fall of Tobruk to the decisive clash at Alamein and the U.S. landings of Operation Torch, the African front became a stage of courage and collapse. How did the Axis nearly win in such a hostile land, and why did the Allies reverse its course with one crushing stroke? Was the last move decided in scorching dunes or in the embattled ports of the Mediterranean? At the start of 1942, the Axis still seemed in retreat after Operation Crusader. The depleted Italian-German forces, short of fuel, withdrew to Elagalia, while the British advanced cautiously. For every mile they pushed in Cyrenaica, their own supply lines grew longer. In that critical interval, the Italian Navy carried out 3 decisive convoy runs, all headed for Tripoli. Convoy M43 left Naples and Messina on 5 January, reached Tripoli on the 7th, unloading tankers of vital fuel and ammunition. Convoy T-16 sailed from Taranto on 22 January, slipped through the Strait of Messina, and entered harbor on the 24th laden with guns and rations. Convoy T-18 departed Taranto on the night of 16 February, crossed the Sicilian Channel, and on the 18th discharged petrol for the panzer divisions together with a load of spare parts. Though harassed by Malta-based aircraft and British submarines, these 3 convoys delivered about 30,000 tons of fuel, food, and ammunition. Far from plentiful, yet more than enough to revive the Africa Corps and the Italian Arete and Trieste divisions. Resupplied, Rommel seized the moment. In mid-February, he unleashed a lightning strike. Agidabia and Elagalia fell back into Axis hands, forcing the British to pull hurriedly eastward. Scattered across a vast desert front, the garrisons failed to form a coherent line. Once more, much of Cyrenaica returned to Italian-German control, overturning London's grim expectations. At sea, the outlook stayed critical but not hopeless. Despite Malta's constant menace, the Regia Marina and Kriegsmarine shepherded further vital cargoes into Tripolitania, maintaining a fragile lifeline. German U-boats and Italian submarines prowled between Bardia and Benghazi, sinking Allied ships and slowing enemy traffic. These naval successes, coupled with Rommel's renewed dash, allowed the Axis to seize back the initiative, living proof that even a few well-protected convoys could still decisively determine the ultimate fate of a hard-fought entire desert campaign. At the start of spring 1942, Erwin Rommel and General Ettore Bastico, commander of the Italian forces in Libya, reorganized the Italian-German units deployed in eastern Cyrenaica. The Axis line now counted roughly 99,000 men, just over half of them German, supported by about 560 tanks, some 330 Panzer III and IV in the Africa Corps, and 230 M1340 and M1441 with the Italian armored formations. The Arete Division under General Giuseppe De Stefanis and the Trieste Division, led by General Arnaldo Azzi, were fully woven into Rommel's operational scheme. Facing them, the British 8th Army mustered about 114,000 soldiers, more than 800 Crusader, Grant, Valentine, and Matilda tanks, and some 600 aircraft. To blunt any Axis drive, the British transformed the Gazala line into a thick belt of minefields and fortified boxes, while the French Free Brigade at Bir Hakeim prepared to hold out to the last man. The Battle of Gazala opened 26 May, when Rommel launched a sweeping southern flanking move aimed at encircling the enemy's defensive corps. Ferocious fighting raged around Bir Hakeim, where General Marie-Pierre Koenig's brigade stood firm until 10 June, stubbornly delaying the Axis advance. Despite that resistance, the Ariete Division broke through on the northern flank with decisive support from German panzers, inflicting heavy, crippling losses in men and frontline armor on the British formations. On 21 June, Rommel and Bastico ordered the final assault on Tobruk. Within 24 hours, the fortress fell. Roughly 35,000 Allied soldiers were captured, along with vast stocks of supplies and artillery. The lightning seizure of the port, crucial to controlling North Africa, astonished even the German high command. Hitler promptly promoted Rommel to field marshal in recognition of his strategic skill. The Italian divisions, often equipped with less modern tanks than the panzers, nonetheless played a major operational role and gained unprecedented prestige thereafter. With Tobruk firmly in Axis hands, the Africa Corps pressed east toward Marsa-Matra and Alexandria, directly menacing Egypt's heart. For London, it was a bitter blow. Churchill faced a storm of fierce criticism at home, while the Desert War braced itself for its most dramatic act. In June 1942, after Tobruk's fall, Axis forces surged eastward. Within weeks, Rommel's Africa Corps, together with Italian divisions, reached the El Alamein zone, scarcely 100 kilometers from Alexandria. The vital Suez Canal, artery of British Empire trade, now seemed exposed to direct assault. General Claude Auchinleck nevertheless anchored a solid, interlocking defensive system between the Mediterranean shore and the vast Qattara Depression, forging a natural barrier extremely difficult for mechanized armor to outflank or swiftly bypass. The First Battle of El Alamein began on 1 July and dragged on for most of the month. Italo-German formations, eager to push through Egypt's gateway, soon ran short of fuel and spare parts, while the British endured punishing attrition in the line. Across the Mediterranean, Royal Air Force and Royal Navy units stepped up attacks on Axis convoys departing Italy and Greece, making supplies ever rarer. Neither Rommel nor Auchinleck gained a decisive advantage. The opposing lines stiffened, and the Desert War slipped into a precarious deadlock. In August, dissatisfied with the lack of progress, Winston Churchill removed Auchinleck and appointed Bernard Montgomery to lead the Eighth Army. Thanks chiefly to the epic Pedestal Convoy, critical fuel and more than 250 brand-new M4 Sherman tanks reached Egypt's ports. Heartened by these reserves, the Allies at last gained the clear numerical edge they had sought for months. Methodical, meticulous, and resolute, Montgomery began a thorough reorganization, welding infantry, artillery, engineers, and armor into a tightly integrated force poised for the decisive autumn battle. Rommel, meanwhile, lingered near El Alamein, knowing that only a steady flow of supplies could power a fresh drive toward Alexandria and the Suez Canal. With the Regia Marina struggling and the Kriegsmarine scarcely present in the Mediterranean, the Axis found it hard to maintain the logistics needed for a rapid offensive. Thus, summer 1942 closed in stalemate, but the coming clash would decide the fate of the entire North African front.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
The Second Battle of El Alamein, fought from 23 October to 4 November 1942, opened with Operation Lightfoot, a massive night bombardment followed by infantry pushing lanes through Axis minefields. On the British line, roughly 220,000 men and almost 1,000 tanks faced just over 100,000 Italian-German soldiers with 500 armored vehicles. After 12 days of assaults, artillery barrages, and dueling armored columns, the toll was grim. More than 17,000 killed or wounded and over 30,000 prisoners, almost all on the Axis side. The Africa Corps lost around 450 tanks. The Eighth Army left barely more than 200 on the field, yet retained crushing superiority. In the skies, Allied fighters and bombers compounded Axis setback. Short of fuel and spares, Rommel ordered withdrawal toward Libya, abandoning tons of ammunition and equipment to the sand during the blazing daylight advance. For the Allies, it was the first large ground victory against German troops. On 10 November, in the House of Commons, Winston Churchill exulted, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat." With the Axis wrecked and almost its entire tank park destroyed, overall strategic initiative passed irrevocably to the Allies. Rommel faced a grim retreat of more than 2,000 kilometers. The Axis had lost momentum, while Montgomery's columns pushed purposefully into Cyrenaica. Only days later, on 8 November 1942, the decisive blow arrived with Operation Torch, an Allied landing of 105,000 troops supported by more than 500 escort ships in a major amphibious assault. 3 separate forces spearheaded the landings. The Western Task Force, 35,000 Americans under George S. Patton, sailed from Norfolk, crossed the Atlantic, and struck Casablanca. The Central Task Force, with 39,000 troops led by Lloyd Fredenhall, left Scotland's Clyde, steered the Atlantic track southward, and stormed the beaches of Arzew and Oran. The Eastern Task Force, 31,000 British, American, and Free French under Kenneth Anderson, also cleared the Clyde, hugged Portugal's coastline, slipped through the Strait of Gibraltar, and came ashore at Sidi Farouk and Algiers. Their convoys braved gales, U-boats, and Luftwaffe reconnaissance throughout the long approach toward Gibraltar. Covering those armadas were 3 fleet carriers, 4 escort carriers, 2 battleships, 7 cruisers, and more than 60 destroyers, while over 250 LCVP landing craft churned the final miles toward the beaches. Vichy forces resisted only a few hours. Most units surrendered or joined the Allies, allowing a rapid seizure of the vital ports with almost no additional bloodshed. With these converging thrusts, the Anglo-Americans threatened Libya and Tunisia from the west, while Montgomery pressed from the east. The Axis found itself caught between 2 fires, stripped of the operational freedom that had sustained earlier campaigns. After the defeat at El Alamein and the Anglo-American landings of Operation Torch, between December 1942 and January 1943, Rommel's Africa Corps and Italian units blew up bridges, roads, and fuel dumps to deny them to the Allies. Rommel, weakened by malaria and continual disputes with Berlin, still commanded at the front. Yet, as he moved toward the Tunisian border, overall command passed to General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, charged with defending the Axis' last stronghold in Africa amid mounting Allied pressure. In February 1943, the Battle of Kasserine Pass marked the first major clash between Germans and Americans. Rommel, leading a mixed Italian-German force, scored a tactical success against an inexperienced U.S. Army. Yet shortages of fuel and reserves prevented turning victory into strategic breakthrough. A few days later, the field marshal, physically worn and convinced the campaign was untenable, was recalled to Berlin for health reasons, leaving Africa on 9 March. Southern Sector Command passed to General Giovanni Messe, while von Arnim retained overall authority for Army Group Africa. Berlin hoped new leadership and revised defensive plans might stabilize crumbling Tunisia. Meanwhile, Montgomery pressed from the east. On 23 January, he entered Tripoli, depriving the Axis of its last supply port. In March, the Battle of Medellin failed to halt the Allied advance, and the breach of the Mareth Line, from 17 to 23 March, forced Axis troops back on Tunis and Bizerte. April opened the final act. With Operation Vulcan on 22 April, the Allies struck on every axis. German and Italian formations, without fuel or ammunition, could not contain the onslaught. Tunis and Bizerte fell on 7 May. and between 12 and 13 May, more than 275,000 Axis soldiers laid down their arms. The African War was over. In a little more than 2 years, the Axis had lost every colony, while the Allies gained the perfect springboard for invading Sicily and opening a new front in Europe against battered Axis holdouts. If this journey through the African campaign intrigued you, truly subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you never miss upcoming episodes, leave a like, and share the video. Thanks for watching. The story continues.